morning, everybody. Welcome to Wicklow Screendance Laboratory 2021. To all our visitors coming from Ireland or abroad, you're so very welcome to Wicklow, to the Garden County of Ireland, and we are running our festival here from Bray in County Wicklow. So my name is Adrienne Brown, and this morning we're going to be looking at Snapshots of Screendance, and we're going to have an opportunity to hear from some of the foremost theorists and practitioners and artists. So it's quite an unusual and rare thing to have people who excel in both the theory and the practice and who are also artists. So I'm very, very happy to welcome to our program this morning Franck Boulègue, Marisa Hayes and Blas Payri. To start off with, I wish to give thanks to the funders who've made this event possible, and that is the Arts Council of Ireland and Lergas Funding. I would also like to thank Dance Ireland for their support in helping along with this project by giving scholarships to 2 participants. I would also like to thank everybody involved and the whole team, which I will thank more fully a bit later. But just to say that this morning we have a packed programme, so we're going to get straight into it. So I'd like to introduce you to Marisa and Franck, Marisa Hayes and Franck Boulègue. They're married, so that's why they're in a screen together, and they are not wearing masks because they're all bubbled up. So they are to the forefront in theory and practice within the growing field of European dance and film. They hold influential positions as directors of Festival International de Video Danse de Bourgogne in France. Franck has a master's in film studies from La Sorbonne Université in Paris. He is a filmmaker, editor, and producer of more than 12 films that have toured Europe, Asia, North and South America. Marisa has a Master of Arts and Letters, Visual Studies, specializing in screen dance, and is editor-in-chief of Repère Carrière de Danse, a dance research journal published by Le Briqueterie CDC, which is a National Choreographic Development Center in Paris. So I'd like to welcome Marisa and Franck, and they are going to speak. The title of their paper is The Antipodes of the Digital Mind, Cathy Rose's Spectral Visions.
Thank you very much, Adrienne, and thank you first and foremost to everyone at the festival, the entire team, for this opportunity to present and share this time with you. Just a bit about our presentation. We are co-presenting today, so I will begin and then I will pass the baton to Franck to conclude in just a moment. And another word about the presentation today. Originally, we had planned to write a paper, as is typical for a conference. And I realized that with the Zoom screen, what seems important is to connect with all of you via the screen. So we have notes, but we hope to have more of an informal conversation where we're able to make eye contact with you, to share our visuals and to speak about them and reference how they relate to certain questions that we've been exploring this week during the workshops and how they relate to events that we'll be seeing this afternoon during the festival. So if you'll bear with me for just one moment as I share my screen. There we are. So the topic of our presentation today is the work of Cathy Rose. Cathy Rose is a prolific artist in screen dance, filmmaking, live dance performance, animation, puppetry, as well as costume and object construction. Just as a personal note, I first saw Cathy's live performance work in 2000, so I've been following her career for around 20 years now. I first made contact with her in 2009. Franck and I both made contact with Cathy Rose in 2009 in the context of the first edition of our Screen Dance Festival in France. We began showing her work, and this became a very rich collaboration in that she regularly contributed films to our programs. And perhaps even more interesting for us is that she was willing to contribute segments to collective films that we commissioned from artists. So we've had a very fruitful collaboration with the artist. She's exhibited work internationally, not just in the context of screen dance, for which she has won many awards at the New York Dance on Camera Festival, being one of them, but she's also an artist who's regularly screened in the context of visual art exhibitions, in performing arts venues, and at other types of film festivals. So her work is very broad and encompasses kind of the concept of the total work of art, where she's active in so many different realms to bring together these interdisciplinary pieces. And we also have a very personal wish in creating this presentation, in that 1 year ago, Kathy suffered an accident and she fell into a coma. And she's currently living in a rehabilitation center. So it's our hope that by keeping the flame of her work alive during this time, we really hope that she'll come back to us in full form and be able to make new work and be able to speak to us about her work. In the context of this festival, one of the reasons that we also wanted to share something about Kathy Rose's process is because we find that there's a strong link to Martha Graham. As many of you may know, there was a Martha Graham focus running throughout this festival edition with workshops. And this afternoon, we'll be discussing Martha Graham in relationship to screens. And the reason that we have this interesting relationship with Martha Graham is actually through one of Martha Graham's contemporaries, Marie Wigman. So you may know the work of Marie Wigman, a contemporary of Martha Graham. They were only born 8 years apart. So if Martha Graham was a huge pioneering figure of modern dance in the United States throughout the 20th century, Marie Wigman was equally so, particularly within Europe and Germany, where she pioneered the German expressionist dance form. Marie Wigman and Martha Graham show many parallels in their work. Both of them witnessed the paradigm shift of the arrival of modernity in the arts. They also witnessed the destruction of 2 world wars, and we can see similar themes running throughout their work in terms of existentialism, expressionism, an interest in mythology and archetypes. So why am I talking about Marie Wigman and Martha Graham during a presentation about Kathy Rose? In fact, the students of Marie Wigman in the 1960s of Berlin formed a collective dance company entitled Group Motion, which was one of the foremost modern dance expressionist companies in Germany, and quickly migrated to the United States at that time, quickly after their formation in 1963. And it is with this performance group that Kathy Rose began her own dance career. So these disciples of Marie Wigman were in fact the artists with whom Kathy Rose collaborated. And we can see this thread running throughout her work, which I'll talk about in just a moment. So despite these correspondences that are quite obvious in terms of Marie Wigman and Martha Graham being contemporaries, there's also been often the question, did one influence the other? And if you know something about Martha Graham's very celebrated personality, you may recall that she was often known as a diva, a very proud woman with a dramatic flair, and she vehemently denied that Marie Wigman had had any influence on her work, excuse me. And I recently heard a very interesting story from an elderly dance historian who was actually at Purchase College in New York, which is an important center for dance learning, who informed me that in the mid-20th century, Marie Wigman was in residence at Purchase College when he was an undergraduate student. And he told me that one day he came upon Martha Graham spying through the window on Marie Wigman working in the studio. And he very cleverly demonstrated the way she was sort of hunched over the window looking through. So we do know that there was some contact between Marie Wigman and Martha Graham, although Graham was quick to deny it. So I think for future dance studies, this may be an interesting point to explore further. But just this quick little anecdote to show that there was a point of contact between the two, and they were certainly aware of one another. So to return to Kathy Rose, you have a bit of information about her dance background, that she has a strong background in German expressionist modern dance, having worked with the disciples of Marie Wigman. Kathy Rose was also very much aware of the work of Martha Graham, who was a prominent choreographer while Kathy Rose was growing up. Kathy Rose was educated in the 1960s and 70s, so Martha Graham would have really been at the forefront of the performing arts companies that had a high visibility on the East Coast of the United States, where Kathy Rose is also from. She grew up in New York City and spent much of her life until recently in Philadelphia. And now that I've said a word about the movement background in her work, I'd like to just speak a little bit about the visual aspect of her work and where that may come from. She had a very strong relationship with her father, Ben Rose, who was considered a very innovative photographer, also working in the mid-20th century. Her father was particularly known for developing stroboscopic printing methods, which allows for this multiple effect of the bodies that you see in the image here. And you'll see why that is so important to Kathy Rose, because multiples are one of the motifs that we see regularly in her films as well. You'll also note the bright color palette present in these photos, which is something that will also surface in Kathy Rose's work. So Kathy Rose, in addition to her dance background, also studied visual arts. And for her master's, she went to the California Institute of the Arts to earn a master's degree at the Walt Disney School of Animation. So Walt Disney certainly conjures up strong images of a certain type of animation, but in Kathy Rose's case and at the school that she attended, it was actually known as a very fertile environment for experimental animation techniques. Some of the most celebrated animators working today attended the master's program that Kathy did. So we'll also see how she uses animation techniques in her own work and applies them to choreographic principles. So in addition to these more Western-based visual and movement motifs, I just wanted to mention that Kathy also has a very strong interest in Asian theatrical forms, in Japanese Buto, in traditional Japanese dance theater that's characterized by very slow movements, such as those that we find in No theater, but also the bright colors that are present in Kabuki theater. She's also very interested in forms of puppetry, such as bunraku. And she's also studied flamenco dance, which she's very passionate about. So I give you these references because there's an entire constellation of Kathy Rose's inner life and interests that really come to the fore in her work. And I thought it might be useful to briefly touch on some of the major motifs that we see regularly in her work that are both a reflection of her individuality, as well as the interests that I've just mentioned. So multiples and fragmentation are two of the main features in Kathy Rose's entire body of work. We see multiples of both the body in its entirety, as well as parts of the body, or what I'll call here fragmentation. These are stills from a film entitled Cubistiminco. So this combines, as the title suggests, an interest in cubism as well as flamenco. And you get a sort of kaleidoscopic effect through post-production work. And I'll give a quote from the artist soon about what type of post-production work she does. I just wanted to mention that with multiples in a dance studies context, it's very interesting because, as many of you likely know, in Western dance, up until the early 20th century, there was a huge use of group dances through the corps de ballet in classical ballet and through what we sometimes refer to as chorus girls or ensemble movements and other types of dance, such as music hall, popular shows of dance. And in these, the goal was really to form a unified backdrop. And this is why you had streamlined body types where there were not many diversions in terms of height requirements, in terms of body shapes, in terms of the diversity of representation, people were really looking to create a unified background. And so in one sense, today with digital tools, we can do this very easily, creating an entire corps de ballet from one body, thanks to digital editing effects. On the other hand, Kathy Rose isn't necessarily seeking to unify the body with her multiples. And here she says, the program I use now, Adobe After Effects, certainly lends itself to multiples. I like to shoot things in reality and then use the program to regenerate them in another world. When working with multiple figures, I often change the timing of each one, so there is more a sense of an organic actual group. So in this sense, we can say that Kathy Rose is not really interested in representing reality, but rather taking a deep dive into a virtual world of the imagination. And in this sense, by using multiples, she speaks to the complexity of the self, of the many different varied aspects. And once again, I think this ties in with her idea of creating an organic group, one that's not necessarily synchronized or unified. As we see here, there are really differences in color and scale and movement. Fragmentation is also interesting in the sense that it allows us to focus on an individual body part. I really would like to maybe evoke a word that comes from film theory that was coined by Gilles Deleuze, a film philosopher. He spoke about the facification that one can find in cinema. Now, the word facification already existed. First, what it means is to put a face on any type of surface. So for example, sometimes we see faces in the clouds. We might recognize a face in the wood grain of a piece of furniture. So this phenomenon has always existed, but Gilles Deleuze really spoke about it in the context of cinema, and that is to speak about the arrival of the close-up in cinema and what that could do to representations of the body and expressionism. He talked about the fact that even though in traditional visual art, the icon is normally of a face and speaks to the expressive power and energy of the face. But here he says that in film, thanks to the close-up, any body part might become an icon and take on that expressive quality and power that can be found in the face. And I think this is particularly true in the work of Kathy Rose, where you have a lot of an almost spiritual relationship to the poetry of different forms of art that she pays tribute to in her work. Here we have another example of the use of multiples. And here I want to point out that in addition to the multiples, there's a very interesting use of space in the sense that Kathy Rose's interest in puppetry translates here to rendering the surface almost two-dimensional with the body. Oftentimes we speak about the power of three-dimensionality in screen dance, but here we really see that the bodies take on a two-dimensional quality. There's also a huge play with the color that can also shift your impression of weight of the body, and that's all the more important in a space that is not tethered to physical conceptions of gravity. This is an imaginary space where bodies and objects float, they're suspended, they're weightless, and this is also enhanced by the use of color and the fact that different body parts take on different colors, lending to different concepts and representations of weight. But to come back to the two-dimensionality, this also plays with a certain form of puppetry, and that she often will exchange body parts, even if they are images of her own body. She'll take one photograph of her head and cut and paste it onto a different photo of her lower body. So all of these different parts become malleable and mobile, the same way that inanimate objects do. And I find this very interesting because often in puppetry, we draw on Freud's notion of the uncanny, because of course in puppetry, you're bringing life to an inanimate object. But it's interesting that Kathy Rose practically reverses the process in the sense that she takes images of moving bodies, she renders them flat as if they were puppets or inanimate objects, and then reanimates them again. So there's a different layer, a different playing and bringing objects to life that in the beginning were not so. So there's a very interesting dynamic and a kind of curious contrast between the familiar, the unfamiliar, the recognizable and the unrecognizable in terms of color and environment that doesn't follow at all a realistic environment. So I'm soon going to hand the baton, as I said, to Franck. I just wanted to mention that Michel Bernard, a dance theory scholar, has spoken widely about the fictional possibilities of the body in terms of awakening our sensorial imagination and the possibilities that the body might bring to a fictional universe, and in developing the space for that. And I think that very strongly defines what we're seeing in the work of Cathy Rose. And I also wanted to point out that, of course, the audience will then retranslate that. So in a way, we can say that spectatorship is going to further rewrite this imagining of the movement that we see on screen, of the spaces and landscapes that we see on screen. And I wanted to mention this word spectatorship because Franck often draws on scholarship in spectrality. So I thought that that might be a nice transition for him. He'll briefly touch on spectrality before launching into an analysis of a recent film by Cathy Rose. So I thank you very much, and I pass now the time to Franck Boulègue.
Thank you, and hello everyone. Before I start, I wanted to mention the fact that this presentation owes a lot to an article Marisa and I co-wrote for this magazine, Artifact, which is a Belgian magazine from the University of Liège, and under the direction of Dick Tomasovic. So I wanted to mention this, at least for the French speakers who might want to have a look at the text we co-wrote. As far as this relationship between spectators and specters is concerned, I wanted to mention the notion of after image. I think that the films of Cathy Rose bear a close link to this notion. So an after image is the image that remains in your eyes after it has been exposed to a violent light, or even when you press on your eyes themselves, you're going to see shapes and colors. Those are after images. And the sort of shapes and colors that one sees with an after image are highly reminiscent, I find, of the color palette and of the shapes that Cathy Rose uses in her films. I think there is something of a link there. Those phosphenes, I mean, that's the scientific name for these after images, are connected directly to the visual cortex. And this is very much the feeling I have when I look at her films. I mean, something that is somehow a short circuit that is speaking directly to my visual cortex without, in a sense, having to deal with the visual world itself. Yeah, so in order to illustrate this, I chose one of her most recent films called Isle of the Invisible from 2017. And I think it is okay to select one film like this from a body of work, because there is a great unity, both stylistic and thematic in her work. In a sense, all her films are of course different, but you can find that they speak to each other, and that they are almost like fractal images. You know, those images that if you go deeper and deeper inside the image, you're going to find the same shapes at different levels of reality. or if you want, that is also reminiscent of the nesting dolls from Russia. There's a big doll and inside there's a smaller one, and so on and so forth. But they might all look the same at different levels of reality. So as far as Cathy Rose is concerned, the images that you see on screen right now, those of Isle of the Invisible, are highly reminiscent of her style. Very often you have those black backgrounds. You have this inverted color palette with a lot of purples, greens, pinks, and yellows. If I move forward in the slideshow, you will see that it keeps this color palette throughout. Those are all images from Isle of the Invisible until the end credits. So you can see that it is not a realistic depiction of the world. There is a real colored universe that is very specific to her work. Her work is very dreamy, it's very spectral, as we have already mentioned, and Marisa has also spoken of the two-dimensionality that is omnipresent in her work, and that you can find, for instance, here with the masks. I mean, they are human faces, but they really feel like masks, like elements that have been glued to the screen. And I'll show other examples later from other films of hers that are very strong images of this practice of hers. Hybrid bodies, that is, bodies that are made from parts of human bodies, but here in Isle of the Invisible, those bodies are mixed with trees. You have all those faces that are put on trees and that become part of the trees, almost like fruits, like on the top right image here, like marionettes that are moved, that are played, that Cathy Rose plays with in her films. So, I mean, one could think in relationship to these, through this close link between human bodies and trees to the famous character from Twin Peaks, the Log Lady. There is indeed something of the Log Lady in all of this, and also of a film from the wonderful Czech film director Jan Schwankmeyer, who made a film in 2000 called Otesanek, in which a log comes to life and becomes a baby. So this is very much what happens here as the trees, the branches are moved as the arms of a performer would move in space. I mean, the trees are dancing in the screen throughout this movie by Cathy Rose. So this is a form of screen dance that is very different, of course, from the one from Maya Deren, for instance, or from Thierry Demet, to give another example. Even though Maya Deren has a very surrealist approach to screen dance, the visual output is clearly distinct from the work of Cathy Rose. And actually, I would argue that Cathy Rose's work is less surrealist than expressionist. It really expresses something coming from inside of her that is put into images. And even more so perhaps than expressionist, and I will come to this a bit later, I think there is something about psychedelia in her work. Actually, I can talk about it right now, but it's a form of psychedelia that is not drug-induced. I don't think that there is any reference to drugs in her work, but there is something about and this is why we've chosen this title, coming from the antipodes of the mind. And that's something we are borrowing from Aldous Huxley, who described as thus what one can find beyond the doors of perception. So in this case, the doors of perception that are leading to the unconscious. This is the unconscious of Cathy Rose that is projected directly on our screen. We see her dreams, we see her thoughts. And even more so than this, and coming back to the etymology of psychedelic, which comes from the ancient Greek, and which is a mix of soul and to make visible, it really manifests her soul. It's somehow a soul that we can see here in these images, a soul put in movement and in images. So definitely not an analog depiction of the world. I mean, it's not an image of the real world, but virtual spaces without actual real references to the outside world. Once again, this is about the inside world of her mind. Expressionist paintings of a floating world that functions with different rules. The rules of physics don't exactly function in her world, in a mental, artistic world as they do in our reality. To come back to this idea of hybridity, I wanted to show some images from other works of hers. And here, I think it becomes clear what I started with, the fractal nature of her work. Even though those are images taken from other works of Cathy Rose, I think it is clear that there is a clear thematic and visual unity between those snapshots and the ones from the film that I've taken as an example. So here you have images from 3 films: Ritual of the Fall, the 2 at the top, She at the bottom left, and Spirit of the Insects on the bottom right. And in these examples, you can see that she's as in Isle of the Invisible, in which she mixes human bodies and trees. Here she mixes human bodies and birds, and human bodies and insects. Those are recurring motifs in her work that are made apparent, I hope, thanks to these images. The human body becomes a patchwork with these elements coming from various realms, both from the vegetal and the animal realm. And one could say that she works with chimeras. The chimeras were monsters from ancient Greece that were a mix of various animals. I think the original one was a mix of lion, a goat, and a snake. And here it's very much the same thing. It's mixing human bodies with other animals to produce these composite, heteroclite beings that don't exist in our reality, but only on the screen as an expression of her mind. And how is this possible? I think this owes a lot to the fact that she works exclusively, at least for a long time, with digital technologies. Digital technologies, that is to say, with a technology that transforms everything into a series of zeros and ones. All what you see here are not real images. They are just zeros and ones converted into images. And the same is true, of course, of the sounds in her films. So everything, a whole universe, is basically nothing but a series of zeros and ones. And it is this digital technology that enables these chimeric bodies that are so prevalent in her work. Another element Marisa mentioned is, of course, the importance of 2D elements in her work, and those are 2 other examples coming from the realm of nothingness and Kubistimenko. And I also included an image of a puppet, as it is one of the important elements that one can find throughout her body of work. One could argue that every single human image in her work is nothing but a puppet. She animates everything and transforms human beings into dolls that are going to be played with thanks to these technologies. So that it's sort of paradoxical to see that she's dealing with the most advanced technologies, the digital technologies of today, of the future, but at the same time, with an imaginary world that actually comes from her unconscious, that is very primordial. So there's a conflict of sorts here. I mean, that produces something beautiful. It's the contact between the repressed, between what is kept at the back in the antipose of her mind, and that is put in contact with these technologies that bring it to everyone thanks to the internet, thanks to digital technology. The tension is very interesting here. Those are hyper-real images, but they are archaic at the same time. And this creates an uncanny feeling that Marisa discussed. And I would argue that even more so than sights, her images are visions, as one would talk about the visions of a visionary person. They depict an entire world, something that is not our reality. It's a reality from beyond, closer to the upside down, if you want, from Stranger Things, than from our day-to-day reality, or also closer to the other world from ancient Egypt, the Duat. And I think that, as you can see on the bottom right of this image, she also has some links with ancient Egypt, and the two-dimensionality of her images are reminiscent of this. I'm going to conclude soon, but I also wanted before that to mention this relationship between the sight, the vision, and the sort of images that she nonetheless manages to create and to convey to us, and put this in relationship with a quote from a Japanese director called Hideo Nakata, who shot a famous movie at the end of the 1990s called Ring, about a cursed videotape that transmits a demon somehow that attacks everyone who's watched the tape. And when he described the film that is on that tape, he said that he tried to depict it as a blind person would imagine a movie. And this is very much the feeling I have, once again, with the work of Cathy Rose. It doesn't seem to me that I'm seeing through her eyes, but I'm really seeing at what is in her mind. These are images from another world that is beyond or before our own world. And to conclude and to come back to what I was saying at first about phosphenes, I just read a very interesting article that mentions the fact that some scientists are trying to use phosphenes to help blind people see again. And I think this makes it this completes the circle in a sense. I mean, we are trying to make blind people see again thanks to these non-images generated by electric impulses in our eyes. And that fits perfectly with what Cathy Rose is doing to create a vision beyond our traditional vision of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Apologies for that delay. I was unmuting. Thank you so much, Marisa and Franck. So much to think about there, and we will respond in due course after Blas's paper and have a fruitful discussion, I'm sure. Thank you very much, both of you. So now I would like to introduce Blas Payri, and in a few short moments, he will be presenting a paper. Blas is a professor of audiovisual communication at the Universitat Politècnica de Valencia, which is in Spain. He teaches digital post-production, sound and image, audiovisual analysis, and music and image creation. Moreover, he is the founder and director of the International Meeting on Video Dance and Video Performance in Valencia, Spain also. I won't attempt to speak it in Catalan. My Catalan is not quite up to that, but his interests include music perception, sound design, film music, screen dance, music and sound technology, music and sonic art composition. And I now would like to take a moment to welcome him to our platform, and he is going to speak to us about camera movement approaches in screen dance. Thank you, Blas.
Hello, I am Blas Payri, and I would like to invite you to study some of the approaches that we have in screen dance when dealing with camera movement. So we are going to see some examples here. So there are several types of approaches or strategies in camera movement that I have grouped first in the camera that follows the dancer. So that would be the subservient camera that depends on the dancer movement. Then the autonomous camera, when the camera doesn't follow strictly the action of the dancer. And finally, the choreography, which is when the camera and the dancer know where they're going together, and they move with a choreography which has been trained together. So it's important to note that in the early cinema there was no camera movement, as camera movement appeared quite late in the history of cinema. Even today, it's very frequent to use a static camera to record video dance. So let's start with the first case when the camera follows the dancer. So let's start with the first type of camera following the dancer, which is the simple panning or tracking, where the camera only reframes the dancer. So if the dancer moves left, the camera moves left, and if the dancer moves right, so does the camera. So the goal is just to keep the dancer in frame. In the films where Fred Astaire was a star, he imposed that the camera keep the dance in frame, so we had a full body of the dancers, and the camera just moved left or right, depending on the movement of the dancer. Sometimes this panning movement to track the dancer is used more to express searching, like a lost gaze or an embodied gaze. We don't know where the dancer is, and we are looking for her or him. In this particular case, I was directing, and also I was the camera person. And the dancer, instead of staying in one position as I had instructed, started to move around. So I was forced to move the camera to track her. And this was actually very interesting because it resulted in this gaze that is looking for the dancer and creates this chaotic movement. We are going to change now, and we continue still with a camera that follows the dancer, but this time the camera moves in space. It's a traveling movement. So when this happens, we have a hunting. The camera is following the dancer, and it gives this sensation of hunting. So we are going to see now when the camera is autonomous from the dancer. The camera can be used to discover and to observe parts of the scene. So in this case, the camera is not following and presenting the whole action. Instead, it is discovering progressively new characters, new positions, new actions within the stage of this dance. In this case, we have a camera that moves as if it were another character. So the camera observes the different characters and switches the focus of attention as a person that enters this space would do. So we have a combination of a properly autonomous camera that looks anywhere, but also a co-choreography as the camera moves along with the characters, but keeping the frame and keeping the distance. In this case, we have a circular movement around the dancer, around the character, and this movement is independent of what the dancer does. Sometimes the dancer moves with the camera, but in any case the camera keeps its circular movement. And the purpose is more like a metaphor of the time passing by relentlessly. In this case, the camera moves around in a circle, but it is a panning movement, a panoramic movement, where the camera keeps discovering this circular space, and the characters happen to get in frame or out of frame, but the camera doesn't follow the characters, it just follows its own path. This can be a metaphor of the relentless passing of time and of destiny. And finally, let's see the choreography of the camera with the dancer.
Más altos.
Oh, quisiera imaginarnos en la cabaña.
In this case, the camera and the dancer follow a very strict and very precise circular movement. So they move up and down and in this circle in a very precise way. So this is really a co-choreography.
Ala norte, por aquella puerta, hacia la habitación de mi padre.
¡Corre! Se escapa con nuestro secreto.
¿Dónde está la condenada?
Ha dejado sus pertenencias aquí, mire. No ha ido lejos.
Está escondida en alguna parte.
¿Qué está pasando?
In this case, we have the same principle of the camera and the dancer moving in circle in the opposite sides of a table. But everything is synchronized and coordinated. In this work that has been done by Fenia and Daz, who are a creative couple and also a real couple, it's important to notice that even though the dancer Fenia is improvising based on traditional dances, there is a complicity and an intimacy that makes this dance actually a pas de deux, really a piece where the dancer and the camera are reacting to each other and can somehow predict or react to what the other does. Finally, we have like a very strict choreography when the camera is attached and strapped to the body. So the movement of the dancer is somehow cancelled as the camera is an extension of the body. And here we complete for now our little voyage around the camera movement in Screendance.
Thank you very much, Blas. Well, we've had two really fascinating papers with contrasting and very fruitful areas that we can discuss. I just would like to open it up if anybody would like to respond to each other's papers or in any way open up a discussion.
Hi, and thank you for the invitation to present a paper. And well, I don't know if it's a paper, it's more a presentation, which I finished really this night. And this breathy voice is not really something that I intended. But at the end, I was really washed out, I think. And let's say that it's an advantage that makes really like a dreamy voice and not something that puts you to sleep. But before we go into the discussion, I'd like to comment also on the on this notion of the moving camera in dance, because it's so important, so essential, and as to reflect also on the title of Franck and Marisa's paper on the anti-digital, or I don't remember exactly what it was, but here one of the main components of Screendance or any audiovisual work actually is the shooting and the technique that you use, or the intention that you have when you are filming, when you are moving, and that implies the movement of the body and the movement of the camera. If you don't have a good or an interesting or an intentional camera movement, whatever you do in post-production, whatever visual effects, whatever editing you do, will just well, make a mishmash, but won't create a real work. I mean, the material is essential, and the camera movement is something that you cannot replace or work afterwards. So to complete the short presentation, where I present some strategies, and basically I think it's clear, no? So we have the camera that just follows the dancer, the action, which is kind of the first way to shoot dance. So, well, you move, and I will try to keep you in track. So this kind of hunting or just tracking tends to be the less creative way to actually use the camera. Of course, the choreography is really something. I think it's something to where people arrive, dancers and filmmakers, once they have explored several works using just the tracking camera. So at some point, I think everyone says now we need to make a choreography or to have a strategy. And also the autonomous camera needs a very serious thought because it's a way around completely different from just filming a dance, because it's the camera doesn't follow the dance. Somehow the dance has to appear in camera, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. So, and it is curious that the best autonomous camera movements come from people that are dancers. So, for instance, Ivona Pasinska's piece, Initiation, where you have like a camera that is turning constantly and slowly in a circular space. So they went to an abandoned zoo, I think, and it was kind of an underground place, circular. I don't know what was there. And the choreography is created like you have things that are happening in every part of the circle. And this was not created by a filmmaker, but by the choreographer. Ivona Pasinska is the choreographer, and she imposed this relentless and just this construction. The other examples we have seen are also like that. So that's interesting because maybe filmmakers don't have these ideas. No, these are ideas that come from dancers. And when I have been confronted with interesting choreographers, etc., at the beginning I say, but what you are proposing is really not interesting. I mean, why would you do that? And then once I see the meaning of what they have, I see that there is an intelligence of the body moving in space that I don't have as more the filmmaking approach. And also I failed to, I didn't fail, but I didn't include other types of uses of camera movement. One is, which is just the expressive use of the camera, which is often something that, well, I use, and I think many people use, which is kind of the camera is moving, not going from somewhere to somewhere, but just to create an instability of the world and to add an energy. I mean, it's not a narrative use or a figurative or descriptive use of the camera movement. It's more an expressive use of the camera movement. And this goes back, for instance, to la caméra en main, no? So camera on the shoulder from the 60s, etc., the Nouvelle Vague and all that. Sometimes it's not because there is a need to do something with the camera, but it also adds to the feeling of not a stable and controlled world. Sometimes now this is abused. For instance, when you see in TV productions, fictional productions or cinema, the camera is moving and you say, stop moving the camera. I mean, because it's true, and it's very important to know that when you have a movement, you add an information. It's like music or sound. Sometimes music is added just to fill the void and to create more information. And a scene that would seem too long with the music, just you have enough information, and it seems shorter. And with camera movement, also you add information, but It is not a venial scene. We were talking about scenes yesterday. This is a capital scene to fill the void of whatever a narrative work or a screen dance work by moving the camera. Sometimes they are moving the camera for no purpose. And if what you are filming is boring, change what we are filming. I mean, don't move the camera to fill the void. So use sparingly the camera movement.
Blas, may I just, I don't mean to stop you in mid-sentence, but can we just take a moment of pause for, at this point, Blas, would that be okay? I wanted to ask Hannah if you could just, we have a few questions in the chat that we might be able to deal with very quickly. It has to do with Hannah, if you would like to perhaps report from the chat box, it'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Can you guys can hear me, yes?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so we just had a question mostly about access to the papers. So both Minty and Helen, who were obviously in our screen dance training this week, were asking if it would be possible to get either copies of these presentations or these papers in some sort of public domain so they can continue their research and their education.
I would just say really quickly, first of all, these links will be live for the whole week, as I'm not sure if they actually finish tomorrow, but they will certainly be live. You'll be able to look at them again. But in terms of Blas, I don't know whether you have, if your paper would be available, perhaps it could be sent on to them.
Yes, on my side, I will probably complete and enhance this video, and as everything, I will put it online and free access for everyone. The thing is, I really finished this video at 3:30 early this morning. So it's really fresh or hot from the oven. It's
hot off the press.
Really, yeah, smoking hot still. And I don't have a written presentation for this, but
I think possibly it's just to have the information, even as it stands, just available, perhaps. I think it's mainly for those who took part in the training this week. I'd like to just open up to Marisa and Franck. Is there anything you'd like to add or comment on or cross-fertilize?
I just wanted to let everyone know that for the time being, we wrote a bit more of a developed paper that was published in a Belgian journal entitled Artifact, which is a digital arts publication. So if anyone reads French, that's available. Otherwise, I'm sorry that we don't have the info available just yet, but I did share the website of Kathy Rose, which has a lot of wonderful access to her work, and I think also some press about her work. So if you'd like to read what other people have noted about her work. And I also wrote a chapter in the Oxford Handbook of Screen Dance Studies that dedicates a large portion of the chapter to Kathy Rose's work. So you'll see some of the overlap, particularly with regards to her use of multiples. But coming back to Kathy Rose, it's interesting what Blas said about the camera work, because I think in terms of the way most people work, I agree with him in terms of this idea that if you don't have interesting camera work images to begin with, you won't necessarily put a Band-Aid on that in editing. But interestingly, perhaps Kathy Rose might be one of the very tiny minority of exceptions, in the sense that the choreography in its sense is really created during the post-production. And while this is true for a number of choreographers who, in addition to having a very extensive work with the camera, will also have an important choreographic moment in the editing suite. But I think with Kathy Rose, it's interesting because she's also working with still photographs sometimes, for example, that are often juxtaposed onto the bodies of other performers. So in that sense, the fact that she plays with scale, reducing, enlarging images, animating them during post-production, it's almost as if the animation is a substitute for the choreographic work during post-production. And she really represents a tiny minority of people where the post-production work would be where all of this happens. And that tends to also happen with those artists who are working with creating virtual environments through post-production work. But I don't know how you feel about that, Franck, but for me, I would say she's one of the few cases where I'm not as interested in the camera work as I am really what's happening during the post-production phase.
Yes, I would even argue that I can't think of camera movement in her films. I don't think she ever moves the camera. I think the movement is created in post-production with the images she's shot, and she's playing with the composition of the image in order to create movement. But the camera is always static as far as I can think.
Mm. And Blas works very beautifully with post-production effects himself in terms of the editing work that he does. Maybe he could tell us also a little bit about the kind of tension or relationship that one finds between camera movements and then what happens with this very choreographic or intensive post-production work that you do.
Yes, I can develop on that. I don't think that that Cathy Rose is an exception at all, and it's even a paradigm. The very example of what I was trying to say, because, for instance, there is, as you say, there is no camera movement, and even she works with static images like pictures, because probably she's thinking when she's filming or when she's creating the images about how she will use it in post-production. So this is really the best way to go. Which is the contrary of asking someone to move and having the camera following them, not knowing really what we are doing. And I think that many pieces, and when I know that I'm going to work in post-production and do a very heavy effect in post-production, like layers and a bit I mean, in all modesty, a bit the mentality of Cathy Rose, but with other ingredients. I mean, I have one piece that I have never shown, which is really Cathy Rose in style, but really the same ingredients. But usually the camera is completely fixed, because if it's not fixed, then I cannot work in post-production freely. No, it becomes just a mess. So you have to do that. So let me. Well, let's continue with this, and then we can go more into the camera movements. But
yeah, I just wanted to add a point about Cathy Rose, though. In fact, what's so unique about her process is that she recycles the same footage. So in fact, she told me that she's not imagining how it will be used in post-production, but that she's recycling a series of images that have been used in live performance, in installation, and in film. And we see these images come up again and again, but transformed through post-production. So in fact, in her case, I think she is rather unique in this sense.
Or not. Again, recycling is something that I have been doing constantly, and using something that was recorded for something else or with no intention, and creating a new piece. But again, she's not kind of mending a deficient camera work in post-production. She's creating something new and not trying to improve the camera work. So let's go into the presentation you've made about Cathy Rose and the title of digital versus analog world. First of all, again, I think we have to separate several kind of post-production work. There is like the editing, and then there are the visual effects, which are two different tasks and mentalities. So I suppose that we can say that the work of Kathy falls more into visual effects in a broad sense. So she works very much with composing images and creating new elements. Actually, for instance, the works that I have analyzed in the presentation about camera work are works that somehow don't distort the image. No? So it's like a real image and just editing or camera movement. But there is also a there are different, there are many layers into that. And I was looking recently at a bit old, it's not so old, but it has some years now, a TV series, which is Monk. I don't know if people know it. It's just a very weird inspector, so some kind of Inspector Colombo, but with plenty of obsessions and germophobia, etc. So, and he's running always into catastrophic situations, and at the end he discovers who done it. No, and in this series, what's interesting is that the stunts are real. So if a car crashes, there is a real car that really crashes, and if the character falls, he falls. It's not a visual effect made completely in post-production. And even if this this TV series is not really like a big action movie, and the actor is not a physical actor, there is a truth to it, to see a car crash, or I don't know, something fall, or something explode. For instance, something explode, and the reaction that the people have to this explosion, when it's done for real in camera, then all the TV series or films that we have nowadays that are all made in post-production. So the explosions are, or the fire is just a post-production effect. And it sounds so wrong. I mean, you see this little budget or medium budget TV series works so much better, you believe, and physically you feel much more what is happening in the action.
Marisa and Franck, do you have any response to any of this? I'd love to.
I'm waiting to hear his point.
Oh, okay, all right.
So this is something about the wrong, and it's a bit like the camera won't, the post-production won't change a bad camera work, and post-production visual effects won't give you the body feeling that a true action will give you. So this is also to somehow to say these kind of visual effects are often something that hinders and lowers the life of what is recorded. So this was one point about the digital world. But then about more specifically the visual effects of Kathy Rose. what I like about her is that she's not trying to create like a realistic thing where things are really made with high level visual effects. And I think that's so important. It's so important, and somehow it's so much more clever than people very proficient in visual effects can do. For instance, if you see a mask on a tree, you see that it is a mask put on a tree and not something that really you have created to look realistic. If it were realistic, first of all, it will never be realistic. So unless it's really, really well done, it will just look like a wannabe thing. But still it will lose power, poetic power. And I think that this kind of naive world of superposition of elements that are not really inscribed into a realistic perspective, a realistic combination of masks, makes it more poetic. And I remember also when I was really young, there was a journal which was called Pixel. It was in France, I don't know. And it put like images that were created by computers with, I don't know, so there were artists that were creating images using algorithms, etc. And you had this poetic world where you didn't know what it was, but I could stay for hours looking at those images. And then at some point, the technology improved and it became, so animation, 3D animation started to become something like industrial and existing. So we replaced that by the, I don't know, animation like Shrek. And you had the aesthetic of Shrek. So yes, you could create a realistic or non-realistic world where you had these the use of 3D images to create these kind of things. And I became completely uninterested into this journal anymore. So I think that realism and etc. kills the poetic mood, and all the visual effects that we are teaching is to create a realistic effect to replace something that has no, that is very expensive to create in real image, and that's a very unpoetic way to go, and it kind of shrinks, I think, the brains of the students and creators that don't use all these tools to create poetic images. And in this case, Kathy works is really interesting and contrarian to that.
Blas?
Yes.
Sorry, the disembodied voice coming in. We just have a question from the audience really quick, and I'm conscious that Marisa and Franck probably have something to add on this as well, but Helen was just asking if you all could give an example of how post-production effects could hinder the life of a work. She wants to make sure she avoids this. So yeah, just wanted to get your all's thoughts on that.
And if I may just pitch in that we have about 11 minutes left and we'll be finishing at 1 because we're back at 2. Okay, thank you. Carry on.
So should I go or?
No. It's just, I'm just giving a time check. We have
yes.
haven't heard anything from Marisa and Franck. I'm quite conscious of that, but I know they wanted to respond to something. But yeah, or answer that question, one or the other.
Well, I suppose we could both speak as people who teach screen dance workshops or facilitate. And I think that there's a certain excitement sometimes when one arrives to the editing table and has never played with post-production effects before, there's a tendency to kind of dive in and overuse because it's very new and, you know, it's discovering a new bag of tricks. And I think it takes time to play with them, experiment with them, and then perhaps find more subtle and poetic ways of using them. I would just add that that's also my personal preference to be more poetic. And I think that in the work of Cathy Rose, if we see a kind of more artisanal side of the side effects, it's not because she doesn't have the technical competency to do so. It's because it really is voluntary on her part. She's someone who has a very long history with animation and has worked, you know, in drawing animation, still by still. She made the shift to digital animation. And I think the fact that she's a visual artist who also fabricates, constructs her own costumes and masks and other art objects, I think that's very important for her to show the object making in the work and have that translate on screen. So I agree with Blas that it really suits the aesthetic of her work. But it's true in terms of what Helen said, that sometimes we see that post-production can completely overpower the image. It can overtake the movement, the sound, everything else that's happening. So I think it's always good to be as subtle as possible, unless you're really going for something that's completely Baroque or some kind of hyper-realism where you need that extreme color correction. Every project is different, but I do tend to regularly see on the part of those who are new to editing and post-production to see an overuse of the technology that's not really integrated into the artist's personal vision or what they're hoping to achieve with the project.
And I think I'm trying not to be dogmatic one way or the other. I think it's fine if someone really likes to use a lot of post-production in a very realistic way, or supposedly a realistic way, or the other way around, as with Cathy Rose, if they actually try to move away from pure realism and use something that is a bit simple and that is underlining the fact that it's artificial. I mean, this reminds me of what David Lynch has done in the third season of Twin Peaks. I mean, the special effects he's created would look amateurish to a lot of people, but it's because they look amateurish that somehow this creates an uncanny feeling. If they were too perfect, they would flow with the rest of the image and you wouldn't notice them. But the fact that they look a bit off suddenly creates a world that is not exactly our world. And I think that this really adds something to the result. And when I'm saying this, I'm not saying that it's not possible to have very nicely integrated special effects, but it has to be done at certain time, at certain moments. When it's all the time, when it's systematic without any thought put into it, it loses its strength. And so I really appreciate this about Cathy Rose. And to me, it's a bit like the film Tron. I mean, there's Tron and there's the remake. The remake from the early 2000s uses a lot of contemporary technologies, whereas the original from the 1980s was much more simple and using only very geometric shapes. But I still think that the first one is so much superior to the new one, even though it looks very dated technology-wise. So I think it's important for people to be aware that it's not always the latest technology that is going to bring the most to their film, and that you can achieve something much more powerful using something that looks a bit funky, as what Cathy Rose does. I mean, it's obvious to everyone that those are things that she's cut and put together. I mean, it doesn't look seamless, it doesn't look like a real image, but it's because it looks made up, because it looks so composite, that it is so powerful in my opinion. And I agree with Blas on this.
If I may just add, regarding Cathy Rose's work, I was just noticing a few comments, or at least I wrote down a few comments about that very much relate to the way Martha Graham worked also, and we'll be talking about her in the afternoon. But it was often said that Martha Graham made a mask of her face, and Cathy Rose's interest in masking. And as you mentioned, the primordial, excuse me, nature of the work, which again, Martha Graham was very much into the primordial impulses in the human. And The other one, of course, was the two-dimensionality, which was a part of certainly the very early aesthetic of Martha Graham, was often compared to the friezes and the hieroglyphics in ancient Egypt and that. So there would be a lot of correspondences there to, I guess, in some ways, to utilizing what might appear to be flat surfaces to access deep kind of impulses or something. So just wanted to reference that because it wouldn't feel relevant to speak about it this afternoon in case we have a different audience. But Blas, is there anything you wanted to add or respond to or anything?
Yes.
Speak.
So just to tackle Helen's question. So, for instance, Kathy works or any work that is about adding layers or compositing the image, go as far as you want and don't make any excuse for it. But again, don't try to be realistic. It has, if it's not, if we don't see the poetic intention of two things are overlayered because we want to make a meaning and not to create a realistic image, that's one point. But on another kind of, because we are kind of talking about very different things. So I said there is the visual effects and there is the editing. So let me finish with the editing. For instance, there are, if you want to make like there are two people and one disappears, so you can shoot it in a way and then in post-production at some point remove one of the characters. Okay, it's not a big complicated thing. It requires some work and to be precise, but I was looking at a short movie where one character disappears and it's not made with any special effect. Is we have one shot of the two characters, then another shot where one pulls the other, and then we change the shot and we see only the first character and the other is not there. So you don't need to do any post-production, just edit, but you have to think very well on how it will end. And this is so difficult to think and, well, not to edit. I mean, because if you have the material, it will be editable. But it requires no post-production technique. I mean, it's just cutting. But it's something that needs to be thought in forehand. The same way that, for instance, you have an angel falling from heaven and falling on earth. You can try to make like a special effect, like you see the person falling, and then arriving on earth, and this will be probably poorly done and boring. If it's well done, it will be probably a bit boring. But the classical thing that has been made many times is we see the beginning of the movement with one shot, then maybe a very close up of the body falling down, and then the impact. And the impact can be just, I don't know, the shoulder hitting the ground or something like that. So this requires no particular setting in for the shooting and no particular thing in post-production. But the feeling of the fall and the final result will be so much more powerful that it's important not to use visual effects and try to think how to decompose a movement, an action, so that we get the essence and we don't need any particular visual effect. So, but this is another kind of production that has nothing to do with Kathy's work, which is in another world and poetry.
Thank you so much. I feel we could go on and speak for a long time, because in a way we probably should have at some point schedule a very open conversation that can just run and run and run, because it does feel like it's necessary. And many of I know some of those who partook in who are participants in the training this week are very much appreciating that, and those messages are coming through here. But I guess since we are due back at 2 o'clock for quite a packed afternoon, we should probably, maybe we'll offer the last word to Marisa and Franck. If there's anything you might like to say or respond to, please take a few minutes if you wish.
No, I think that covers it for my part. I mean, as Adrian mentioned, it's so elaborate. It's something that we could speak hours about each point. So we haven't really had the time, but hopefully it was a kind of point of departure to inspire certain thinking about certain practices in screen dance. And the whole has been really wonderful for that. And I would just encourage everyone to come back this afternoon.
Yes.
Even though we lightly touched on Martha Graham, I think it would be really interesting to dive deeper into her work and the work being made today inspired by Martha Graham as part of that constellation in which Kathy Rose is placed as well.
Yes,
I think just one last little thing. I think all of these questions are related to what is reality and what is the reality of screen dance, the ontological nature of screen dance and its relationship to live dance. I mean, which is basically what Blas was talking about filming the real fall, or as opposed to the possibilities or to create worlds on screen. And I just wanted to say about Kathy Rose that, in my opinion, her universe, it's not that her universe is not real. It has its own reality. Let's put it this way. I think it has a reality that has more to do with, once again, her subconscious than it has to do with the reality, the physical reality in which we live. But both are real. My dreams are real. They happen to me, at least. And I think that the films that she shot are very real for her, and she transmits that to us. It's just that it's another world. It's just a different set of rules that function in this reality.
And if I may just add to Helen's question earlier about how much is too much with post-production, and Blas's answer, go for it, and just, you have to try things out. But I think all of that has to do with developing your own artistic voice, and whether it be entirely post-production based and entirely, as you said, Marisa, Baroque, is one thing. It's just you have to try things out and see what is giving you that artist expression yourself, which is unique to you. So it's very hard to give hard and fast rules to these things, I think.
And sometimes it's necessary to push the tastes of the audience.
That's true.
Sometimes the audience is going to say, it was too fast, I couldn't take it. And 10 years later, they will say, oh, that's so slow.
Yes.
So our tastes evolve, and our relationship to art evolves all the time. And some of the paintings from the Baroque era feel so decadent, but at the time it was just the norm. So I don't think, once again, it's very important not to be dogmatic about any of the choices we make, and to understand that how relative all of this is, which doesn't mean that you shouldn't have your own vision and your own tastes, but to be very modest about the possibility for other people to function and have slightly different directions in their work.
Yes, absolutely. Well, everybody, I think we may just say thank you to Marisa and Franck, and to Blas also, for really very considered and very fascinating papers, and bringing their own unique perspective and their expertise, and they are true artists in the fields that they're working in. So they really are speaking from, being at the coalface of creating works. So I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for being part of this session this morning, Snapshots on Screen Dance. And we will convene again in a little bit less than an hour for an afternoon, and we'll have our next session starting at 2 p.m. Irish time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.